Hello and welcome to another Fabric Data Days. So excited to have our speaker Raj join us today and all of you for Fabric IQ for data professionals. So hello and welcome everybody. I believe many of you know me as your host, and if you don't, I'll take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Philippa Burgess, and I'm one of the co-leads for the Microsoft Fabric Location Intelligence and Security User Group. And I will, in a moment, you'll make sure you kind of know where you can find us. We have a meetup and we are in the Fabric community. And now I will turn it over to our speaker, Raj.
Thank you, Philippa. And good morning, everyone. Really excited for today's session. And welcome to this session 4 of the Data Days. My name is Raj Kanwal, a Senior Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft, focused on the data and AI. I work with the customers trying to do something very practical, make data trustworthy enough that people and application and now AI agent can make decision from it. So you will see some recurring example throughout this session, which is going to be a facility, asset, sensor, or location. I'm going to use that because this group cares about the location intelligence, security, and operations. So rather than just explain Fabric IQ as an abstract product feature, we will use an operational scenario that will connect the data, geography, business context, and action. So really excited to get it started. A quick bit more about me. So you may know the lens that I'm bringing. I have spent the last several years at Microsoft helping customer architect data platforms, Fabric, Data Factory, data movement, analytics, and increasingly AI-connected data system. I also work with organizations where governance, security, compliance, and explainability are not optional. In those environments, you cannot just say the AI said so. You need to understand where an AI came from and which data was used and what permissions was applied. So this is exactly why the topic matters. And Fabric IQ is not just making about the AI sound smarter, it is about giving the AI more governance and a context so that when an agent answer or recommend an action, the answer is grounded in the same definition. So where this session fits in. The data days has been building towards this topic. And we started with the location intelligence and mapping. And then we looked at as spatial analysis in one of the session. And then in the last session, we covered the security and governance in Fabric. Today connects the dot and all those pieces into an AI conversation. Fabric IQ is relevant because of the relationship context and security boundaries. And for this audience, location is not just a side detail. Location is something that you need to give a response priority, and we will come back to that later in the session. So we will be going through some of the topics in our session throughout. We will first define what Fabric IQ is and why it matters now. Second, we will talk about some semantic models. Many of you have already have been gone through the Power BI. And if you have not thought of them as AI as a yet, the third, we will go deep on ontologies. This is the most important section because ontologies are where we move from data definition to the business meanings. For example, entities, relationships, properties, and rules. And then we can connect that to an agent, giving some guardrails, auditability, and location. Finally, we will close that with a practical first 30 days plan so you know where to get started. This session will carry these 3 words, which is going to be really important for your own understanding. So before we go further, let us define the 3 words carefully. Semantic model, ontology, and agent. A semantic model is the shared glossary or the rule book for the data. It defines metric, measures, table, relationship, and security. So if we are talking about the practical terms, it answers questions like, what does the revenue mean? What does the active customer means? What filters apply and who should allow to see that? So in Power BI, semantic models are not just play the role for the reporting, but it also gives you those policies and the guardrails. Whereas an ontology is a structured map of your business meaning. It describes the real world thing that matters. for example, the customer, contract, product, facility, and so on. It also describes how those things relate. A sensor belongs to an asset, for example. An asset can sit in a facility. A facility is in certain location, and a route serves a site. So these could be, relationship that can be affected if anything happens in one of the telemetry. So those relationships are what allow the agent to reason across a context, not just on the table or the data. And instead of just looking up a metric. An agent, whereas, is a software that can answer a question with a permission. It can take or recommend actions, and that is why the foundation is matters, right? So if an agent is going to act, we need to inherit the definition, permissions, relationships, and rules. Otherwise, we are scaling confusion. And when we talk about this, we need to understand the flow of it. So from a raw data to a trusted AI action. And this is going to be a flow of our Fabric IQ session. And this is the mental model for the whole session. The raw data, shared meaning, business context, trusted reasoning, and then implement in action. Raw data is necessary, but it is not sufficient. A table can tell a sensor reading is high, but it may not tell me the sensor belongs to which facility and which facility is affected. It may depend on a route that depend on that facility and what customer mission is impacted and if there are any approved response that should be. So the shared meaning that comes from the semantic model, there is a business context that can come from ontologies, and trusted reasoning can come from the graph and agent. Using the context, action comes when the agent can recommend or execute a governed workflow. If the audience remember one thing, remember this. AI becomes useful when it understands the business behind the data. And this is what we are going to talk about in our next slide, which is going to be a Fabric IQ. And why now? So let us start with what is Fabric IQ and why is it important now? The short answer is going to be Fabric IQ is a shared context layer for your business data in Microsoft Fabric. But the long answer is what we will unpack in our upcoming slides. So here's the business problem in a simple form. Imagine asking three teams the same question, what is a customer? Your organization have a department and the teams called marketing, sales, and finance. If you ask this question to the three different teams, what each team is going to answer. Marketing may say a customer is someone who downloaded a white paper or registered for an event because to them, this is what an active customer means. Sales may say a customer is someone with an active contract or an opportunity. A finance may say a customer only counts after payment clears because that is what the active customer means to them. But none of those teams is necessarily wrong. Each definition is reasonable for that teams. Where the problem is start? The problem is start when we feed all of that into an AI system without any business context. So if an executive asks, how many customers do we have? The AI might find three different definitions without a governed semantic layer. It may pick one arbitrarily, blend them together, and then return a confident answer that can be wrong. And this is what people often call hallucination. But in many enterprise scenarios, the root cause is not the language model alone. The root cause is the enterprise has not agreed on the meaning. And this is why the Fabric IQ matters. We cannot make the AI agent speak the same language if the enterprise data itself does not speak the same language. So just think for a moment. What is the one word at your organization, or if you are at a school or university, that means different things depending on who you ask? And that's where you can actually get started to think how Fabric IQ can comes into play. When we talk about some gap analysis, we also need to know like why some AI project can get stalled on the foundation. And that is one of the reasons. Many AI projects stall not because the model is weak. We often talk about we should be selective on certain models, but sometimes it's not just a model. It is because the foundation is weak. The model may be very capable because it is being asked to reason over inconsistent definitions, unclear relationship, and missing lineage. And then there is a fragmented security, which is one of the important factor too. So in a fragile AI environment, every agent relearns the business from scratch. One agent uses one definition of revenue, another uses a different definition. Relationship lives in people's head instead of in a data platform, and that's where the problem comes in. If the agent gives a surprising answer, no one can explain why. Whereas in a trusted AI environment, the organization has already a shared understanding of the business metrics and have governed definition. The entities and relationships are explicitly modeled, and security is inherited. The lineage on auditability are available, and the point is not just a better answer, the answer that can be explained and defended. That is what the trusted AI is. So we need to make sure that we are focused on the foundation instead of just being very selective on the models. Now that we are talking about the Fabric IQ, we also need to kind of be aware of the IQ ecosystem that the Microsoft brings in. The Microsoft IQ is a family of the capabilities that provide the context for AI application and agent. Work IQ focuses on workplace contexts like people, meeting, emails, document, and collaboration inside the Microsoft 365. Whereas the Web IQ grounds agent in the current web content, the Foundry IQ helps agent to use the knowledge system across the systems, and the Fabric IQ is one we are focused on today. It looks inward at the structured business data, which is entities, metrics, relationship, rules, and the operational signals, which we are going to discuss more in detail. So you will have a better understanding. In other words, the Fabric IQ helps AI understand the business itself. So that distinction matters. If you ask a customer agent about a customer, a facility, or any entity, you do not want it to guess from the raw tables. You want it to use a governed model of what those things mean and how they relate. So let's talk about the Fabric IQ in one picture, right? And this is the architecture picture to remember. If you start with the one lake is the unified data state in Fabric. It contains the lake houses, warehouses, event houses, mirrored, and the shortcut files. And this is the physical data foundation. Then we have the semantic models. These are basically the governed metrics, measures, relationship, and the security definition that many organizations may already maintain through Power BI. And semantic model can answer like, what does this metric means? How is this calculated, and who can access it, right? Above that, we have ontologies. Ontologies model the business entities, not just like the metric definition. It modeled the business entities and relationship. They answer what real world thing does the business care about and what properties do they have? Are there any rules that can govern them and how do they connect to each other? And then we have an operational context. The operational context is a live signal, event, a telemetry, and alert, and a current state that gives you a live data. Then agent and co-pilot experience can consume all of this. So the goal is not to expose every raw table to every agent. The goal is to give the agent a governed, business-friendly context layer. Now that we have talked about the architecture, there were some timelines where these features were introduced. And why is this urgent now? Because the agent ecosystem is moving from the experimentation to the production. There are several building blocks that already are generally available. Fabric IQ as a shared context layer, Operation Agent for real-time action, Graph in IQ for the relationship first modeling, and the planning in Fabric for the scenarios and the forecasting. Ontology and Deeper Foundry or Agent 365 integration are still in preview, so we should be precise about what is production ready and what is emerging. But the direction is clear. The hard part is no longer simply getting an access to an AI model. The hard part is preparing your data estate so the model has trusted context. And this is the shift I want you to take away from today's session. The differentiator becomes the data readiness, not the model access. Now let's transition from raw data to the shared menu. So we now move from raw data to the shared menu, and we can talk and ask an agent to reason over the business. We need the business to agree on what the number means, what the definition of the metric means. This brings us to the semantic models. If your organization uses Power BI, there is a good chance you already have semantic models. And the opportunity is to treat them as not just only as a reporting asset, but in today's era, it is to treat as an AI grounding asset. Now that we have talked about semantic model as a foundation, we also need to know how it can become a building block for the Fabric IQ. So historically, we built semantic models so that people could create dashboard and reports. The model helped ensure that the revenue margin or is there any other metric that can have and will be calculated in the same way across the report. Whereas in the agent era, the same semantic model become more important. It becomes a part of a context that an agent can use to answer the question instead of just agent directly inspecting those raw tables that can be a bit messier without having any business context. So it can rely on the governed definition already curated by the data teams. So think of this flow as like one lake store the data, semantic model define the metrics, whereas the Fabric IQ add the business context on top of it through ontologies and the live signals. Agent and the co-pilot can experience use that context for the trusted answer and the workflows. And the semantic model is the bridge from raw data to the shared menu. So that is how the reporting asset can become an AI asset using a Fabric IQ semantic model as a foundation. Now that we have talked about the agents, we also need to know like the agent trustworthy data for the semantic models. Not every semantic model is automatically ready for agent. To be agent trustworthy, it needs to have a few qualities. Number one, the metric, having one metric, one definition, which means if a revenue is defined in three different ways, an agent can inherit the ambiguity. The second is the security that must be modeled. For example, a rule level security and object level permission should carry into an agent experience so that the agent cannot show a user more than the user is allowed to see. Third is the relationship that need to be explicit and the well named. If an agent has to guess how many tables it relate, it may choose the wrong join path, right? So fourth is the description that matters. Major descriptions, table descriptions, column description, although it kind of sounds glamorous, but having those business-friendly names are not cosmetic anymore. They are how an agent can understand the intent. So this is one of the most practical change the data teams can make right now is to improve the description. Clean up the duplicated metrics, certify the trusted models. And those are not just the task, but they can directly improve your AI quality. To have a static dashboard now turning into an intelligence in the loop. And this is a payoff that is a shift from passive reporting to an active intelligence. In the old model, the dashboard can wait. A human has to open it, notice a problem, interpret what it means, and decide what to do. If no one looks, nothing happens. But in the newer model, agent can monitor the governed metrics. It can detect the meaningful changes, and they can investigate using the shared definition, surface relevant context in Copilot or Teams, and can recommend a next step. With the right guardrails, they may trigger a workflow or create a notification. And this does not remove a human from the process. It changes when a human enters the process. Instead of asking people to constantly scan the dashboard, we can bring them into the loop when something needs attention. And this is the proposition in this slide. So just a quick poll in the chat just to get to know. Let us pause and make this real because I want to know like how many semantic models are you using right now, or is your organization using right now? So if we can take a pause and see like how many of you are aware with the semantic models, and how many semantic models do you think you are using right now, or your organization is using right now? 20 plus, 60 to 20. See, we have a lot, and thank you, Michael. See, a lot of folks are definitely giving like 6 to 20 semantic models that they are aware of, and that's like how we are aware of this and how many organizations are using the semantic models. If anyone answer like not sure, that is not something be a bit not be a bit ashamed of, but it is often the starting point because many organizations discover that they have dozen of models with the overlapping definition, and you may have find that if you are working in a project, you may have find one 600 plus. Wow. I need to know like which project, a specific project you are working on that has a 600. And yeah, the organization, the enterprise organization does have that number of semantic model that they are working on right now. And if there is not a semantic model in place, we need to start thinking of how we can start the modeling, the data modeling that can define a metric definition, that can define how a metric can be calculated and how a security can be in place and who is allowed to see the data. And that is not unusual, but because before the AI, it becomes the important to inventory and decide which models are trusted enough to ground agent, right? And that is where the matrix transition into the meaning, which is called the business context. Business context, whenever we are talking about the business context, we are talking about the ontologies, right? So semantic model help us to define the metrics consistently. Now we have to go one level up, and that is where going to be fabric IQ in. We move from metric to meaning, and what those metric connected to in the real business give us the meaning. Ontologies, and this is the most important section of the session. Ontologies are where the fabric IQ moves beyond the reporting definition into a business understanding. So let's talk about what it actually is the ontology is. Um, Ontology is a structured map of your business. So let us use one of the scenario that you can see on the screen is about the facility that can have the asset, sensor, location, incident, and how that can relate to each other. So each of these boxes is an entity or a business concept. Each entity has a property. A facility can have a name, address, location, service area, or a risk profile, whereas an asset can have a type, a status, honor, or support a mission. And these relationships let the agent move from a raw signal to a business impact, right? So asset can have a type, route can have an origin, and incident may affect a route. Now you see how we can create the ontology to define the business meaning. And finally, the ontology can include the rules and actions. For example, if a temperature stay above the threshold for more than 10 minutes, create an incident, right? And if that affected asset support a high priority route, notify operation. And that's where the operation agent comes in. So if the impact crosses a mission threshold, require human approval before action. I have another question in the later slide that I will ask. What do you think when the human intervention is possible if there are any agent that doesn't require the human intervention? All right. So let's talk about more in detail. Now that we have talked about the semantic model and ontology, what's the difference? Like what semantic model knows versus ontology understand? A lot of people do come with this question and have a confusion in mind that now we are talking about ontology, how it differs from the semantic models, and what is the comparison between the two. And in this slide, we are going to talk about this to understand more about what semantic model knows versus what ontology understand. And that is going to be a distinguish between the two. So this slide is the clearest distinction in the deck, right? A semantic model can know that incident response time is 42 minutes. That is a metric definition. That's what's calculated, and it gives you that definition of the metric calculation. It is in analytics, like a fact, metric, measures, or aggregation with a governed definition, right? Very valuable, but it's still mostly about just the number. If we look at the ontology understanding, what the number is connected to. So if the response time is 42 minutes, the ontology can connect that to incident type, facility, asset class, service route, responsible team, and a mission impact, right? So if revenue decline, it can connect revenue to customers, contract, product, region, and renewable status, and another example. And this is the difference between answering what happened and investigating why does it matter, what is affected, and what should we do next. Knowing the number is analytics, but understanding what it has affected and connects to is next level intelligence. And that's why the ontology is. So I'm hoping that you may have now a better understanding about the purpose of the semantic model and the ontology that what it gives you. Let's talk a bit more about the facility example. So we do have like this working example that can traverse the ontology and let us understand. So an agent comes with a response that the temperature alert traces to sensor 14 on freezer B in facility 7. See, a lot of connected entities that you are getting, a detailed answers on. So let's understand this. A sensor report a temperature anomaly, right? And that is by itself just a telemetry. The ontology tells us the sensor belongs to a specific asset. An asset that sits in a facility and facility is in certain location, it can have an incident that can affect a route. A route is tied to some customer impact. Now an agent has to reason from a raw signal to the business consequences. So without the ontology, the agent might just reason across the sensor telemetry and say that sensor 14 is over threshold. It is useful but incomplete. And with the ontology, the agent can say sensor 14 on freezer B, which is an asset, and facility 7 is over threshold. This affects two routes and one high priority delivery. Recommended action: do you want to notify our operation team and check the backup capacity? Notice what changed here. And it is a big difference. We did not just get a better sentence, but we got more explainable path. And it really helps the business and the consumers to know what actually happened, how it affected the other entities. So every step can be expected, from sensor to asset, asset to facility, facility to route, route to mission impact. And that is why the ontology matter for the trust. So the raw table versus the business entities. This slide is inspired by, you may have seen a lot of Fabric IQ walkthrough videos, and it's inspired by one of those videos. I just put it in this slide to give you a big idea that what the raw tables versus the business entities mean here. The big idea is that the agent should not be forced to reason directly over the raw storage structure when the business entities are available. That's why we create the semantic models, and that's why we need to have an enhanced business context that the agent can reason across. So in a raw table view, we might have a telemetry event, a mission status, maintenance log. For the facility example, we can have a facility table, sensor events, route log, location, geo coordinates can be given in those tables. But a human expert may know how those tables connect, right? But a new user or an AI agent may not. and it has to infer which table matters and which column is authoritative and how the relationship works. In the business entity view, the agent work with concepts like facility, mission, task, telemetry, and the maintenance action. For the audience, let's translate that to the back to our facility use case, which is having the asset, sensor, location, incident, route, or the mission impact, right? So if the user asks about the business entity, the ontology can hide the storage complexity and the raw data behind it and binds those entity properties back to the underlying data. The abstraction is powerful here because it does not just remove the need for the data engineering, it makes the output for the data engineering usable by human and agent in the business terms. So I do have a quick demo that I want to show you that will kind of help you to walk through the Fabric IQ, how it works in live, in action within the Fabric workspace. So um, I can share my screen and Philippa, if you can help.
Yep. Share your screen. I'll add it.
Okay. So I do have a YouTube video, but I wanted to kind of show you.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Am I good to go?
There you are.
Thank you. So this is one of the Microsoft Fabric that published this short video about how the Fabric works live in action and how it can connect to the Foundry IQ. So I'll just show you as an example that how it works. So there is going to be an example for the airline industry because airline can have different entities like the aircraft, flights, crew that matters. And what you are seeing here on the screen is the ontology right now, which contains the airline as one company that can have different entities it depends on, like flights, ground service tasks, crew, aircraft, airport, and the entities can have sub-entities that it depends on. This is how you can create the ontology by, you know, giving in or bringing in the reports that may have already built on the semantic model, or you can also create an event house that can give your operation context on it to capture the live signals and the live event that happens on the airline. The runways, the frictions, the contamination, all the relationship graph you can see over here. You can also use the fabric graph that can give you and walk you through how the airline connected to different flights and how flights have different conditions and the time to take off or to land. On top of it, we can consume it with using the operation agent that can notify the operation team. And it also extends to the Microsoft Foundry, which is a developer suite where you can bring the Fabric IQ in a developer agent platform to more optimize that operation and can have the surpassed outcomes. So that is how from a unified data, the Microsoft Fabric can have a unified intelligence. And I can stop sharing. I hope that helps. So let's go back to our presentation deck. So we did see in our live demo that there was a fabric graph. So let's talk about that fabric graph for a moment. What is a fabric graph and why is it important? Because the relationship becomes the first graph in the traditional query, we talk about that approach. If I want to connect the answers, sensor, facility, route, and asset, I may need multiple joins and nested logic. The person writing the same query need to understand the schema and the business relationship. With the graph style reasoning, we model the relationship explicitly. store, or facility can connect to an asset connect to sensor to a telemetry, and facility can connect to a route. Route can have a mission impact and a customer impact. So agent can traverse the relationship network without guessing the joint path. So a good way to say it is ontology is the map, whereas a graph is how the agent walks the map. And this becomes especially important for the multi-hop question, where the answer is not just in one table or in one metric, but can be across the several connected business concepts. So fabric graph is what helps the agent walk through the map, whereas the ontology is the map. Now that you have an understanding of the ontology and the semantic models, there are two ways to build your ontology. The first is to generate or bootstrap from your semantic model. A lot of organizations and many of you may be already using a semantic model. So if you already have a Power BI model with a well-defined tables, major or relationship, it can give you a starting point. So you can promote that into a more richer business model and then can refine into entities and relationship. The second path is to build from one lake directly from scratch. This is useful when the domain is not already represented by a mature semantic model or when real-time and operation data lead the use case. For example, if your use cases start with event house telemetry or operational logs, you may bind entity properties directly from those sources. So most real organizations can have the hybrid approach, which means that they can have the existing semantic models that provide the business metrics foundation and can have one lake and event house sources that can provide more operational sale and the life signals. So where ontology is today. Ontology is a preview feature. So the right approach to deliberate the learning is to not start by trying the model the entire enterprise. Start with a sandbox workspace with one domain and define entities, bind properties to data, model key relationship, and test a simple agent scenario. Preview does not mean to ignore it. Preview means to learn the pattern now so that when the tooling mature, your team already understand what good looks like, right? So the organization can wait with the organization that wait until everything is fully packaged may find that they still need to on months to clean definition and identify the entities and agree on ownership. So it should have, a balance of both. So you can get started for now to test the functionality and the features. And then once you have that in the GA, you know what use cases you need to implement that. So now that we have a good understanding of the business context, it is really vital to have a trusted reasoning over that, right? So at this point, we have unified data, shared definition, business context. The next question is, how do we let the use agent use the context safely, and especially when the actions are involved? So this will give us a transition from the business context into a trusted reasoning. Building an AI-ready foundation. So this will connect the Fabric IQ to the broader AI-ready foundation. Live signals, operations, agent, guardrails, auditability, and location intelligence. Once we talk about this, we should be talking about the operational context too. That is going to connect the ontology to right now, which means the real-time context and the real-time events. So operational context is where the ontology connect to what is happening right now. In many organizations, analytics looks a bit backward. What happened yesterday, last week or last quarter, operation agent need a current state, which means what is happening right now, what threshold was crossed, and what rules applies, and what action is appropriate. So the live signal may come from telemetry, events, alert, application logs of the security signals, or any IoT sensors. Fabric real-time intelligence and event houses can handle those high-velocity streams, but Fabric IQ connect those signals to the business entity. A raw signal becomes meaningful because it lands on the right asset, facility, location, or process. And when the set signal is connected to the entity, an operation agent can evaluate the condition against the rule. It can recommend a response, notify the right team, and open a workflow or ask the approval. The key is that the action is grounded in the business context, not just the threshold. So when we talk about the operational context, now that we may have talked about the two mode of agencies. So what's the distinguish between the two mode of agencies? We have a data agent, the agent that is reactive. It waits for a question like which facilities has the most incident last month, more like an analytical virtual analyst, right? Or which routes are currently impacted. It behaves like a virtual analyst. An operation, on the other hand, is proactive. It watches the signals, evaluate the condition, and notices if an incident occurred, determine which entities are affected, and propose an action. It behaves more like an autonomous operation assistant, also with the governance and approval we needed. So both types need the same foundation, which is the Fabric IQ, but they need the trusted definition and the governed access business relationship and the business context. And that is the difference. Where is when they get engaged? Data agent answer when asked. Operation agents notice when something matters. So I often call that as virtual analyst versus the autonomous actor. Now that we are talking about the agent, we do not have to forget about the guardrails. And when we are working in the production, the guardrails is really important. So we need to talk about that a bit more. The more an agent can do, the more trust matters. And trust me, it can go very wrong if we skip any of these best practices. If an agent only summarizes a report, the risk may be low. And if it recommends the operational action or a trigger workflow or changes a process, then governance becomes central. Human in the loop is one important pattern that the agent can detect a condition, explain its reasoning, and send a proposal to a human for approval. That gives the organization, you can say, a way to learn and build confidence before moving to higher autonomy, right? And then we have to also make sure that security inheritance is somewhat critical. The agent should not become a side door around the permission. If user cannot see certain data in Fabric, the agent should not reveal it. And we have purview for audit logs that provide the traceability and gives you who asked what resources were accessed, and what answer was returned. We also have the agent registry and the output protection that help manage discoverability, authorization, and the data exfiltration risk. So the point is not to avoid the autonomy forever, but is to earn the autonomy by designing the trust before scaling action. Because if we are working on a use case, we might have a small use case right now, but we may going forward have a bigger use case. And if we don't have a guardrails and security inheritance in place, it can become very risky for us to control that. So let's pause and discuss. I know I have done a lot of talking. So let's pause and discuss. We have discussed about the agency's mode, the data agent, operational agent, ontology, semantic model. I mean, everything is boiling down how agent can behave and can provide us correct and confident answer that can share the same business context and business meanings. But let me know, what do you think if an agent can act without human approval today? Um, there could be different answers, but I would like to know from your perspective, how would you build the agent? Would you like to build for some use cases with the human loop intervention, or would you like to have surpasses the human loop and then just recommend and perform an action based on the recommendations, the reasons? Drop your thoughts on the chat, and we can talk about that a little bit more.
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just put the question on the screen. You can give me the question again so I can write that up so everybody can see it.
Yeah, so would you let an agent act without a human approval today? Is this something you may have a use case that you think an human intervention may be needed for that use case? Just drop your thoughts in the chat and we can discuss a bit more.
Is this it?
Yes.
All right. So if you've got a comment on this, I'll go ahead and answer myself and see if how other people want to answer this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say no. What are other people's thoughts on on agents? Okay, here we go. We've got some.
I like the Dean also. Depends on what the agent is doing. Yeah. And that's what we are going to discuss today. That it basically, yeah, it is important. It might not be important. It depends on the use case. Yeah, but most likely no. Yeah, when we don't know what agent can do, we should maybe have a human interval in the loop so that uh, any human in the loop can approve or deny the action request. So human in the loop, and thank you everyone for all the answers that you are giving in. Um, that's great. So human in the loop is one important pattern. The agent can detect a condition, explain its reasoning, and send a proposal to a human for approval. That gives the organization a way to learn and build confidence before moving to a higher autonomy. Um, but we need to also understand that there is no single right answer. A mature environment might allow automatic low risk action, like, for example, creating a ticket or sending a notification, right? A regulated or mission critical environment may require human approval for anything that changes the operation. So what matter is basically is matching the autonomy to risk, maturity, auditability, and trust. If you have a low risk actions, we might can escape the human intervention in loop. But if there is a mission critical actions that needed a human approval, we should have a human loop in the agent that can have a approval or denial when that agent recommend anything. So this is why the fabric IQ and governance belong in the same conversation. If an agent acts on unclear definitions or invisible relationships, that is dangerous. If it acts on the governed context with traceability and approval, it becomes much more practical. So when we are talking about having an AI ready, we need to talk about the some capabilities that can make the foundation AI ready. So here is an AI readiness checklist that we will talk about. The first is the data unification. The data does not all need to be physically copied into one place, but there need to be a governed way to access it through one lake, shortcuts, mirroring, or the fabric workloads. Second is shared semantics. Is basically a human and agent need a consistent metric definition. So if the business cannot agree on revenue, customer incident, or facility, the agent will not magically resolve it. So we need to have one definition and one metric that can have one definition. Then we need an entity resolution because the same customer and facility must be recognized consistently across systems. If the same facility appears under multiple names or IDs, the agent may split context incorrectly. And the number four is the lineage and auditability. I mean, to have the trusted AI output, it requires the tracing answer back to the sources. And that includes the data lineage, the model lineage, security context, and AI agent interaction logs. So without the traceability, you cannot defend the answer. So we need to make sure that the unit data unification, shared semantics, entity resolution, and the lineage and auditability are in place to have the AI ready foundation made. Sorry, excuse me. And when we are talking about all this, there is a slide that built specifically for the group, where many system location is treated as a metadata, an address field, a latitude or longitude column, or a label or on a record. For AI-ready operations, when we are talking about the operation agents, that is not enough. Location should be modeled as a first-class entity, like region, site, facility, asset, service area are all maps. They have properties, relationships, and rules. A facility can be inside one location. A route can process one service area. A route asset can locate it at a certain site. One of the example can be like if a facility location is impacted by a wildfire boundary, that will disrupt a logistic route, right? So that route delay affect a high value contract or mission, and the agent can identify the affected entities and explain the path and recommend who should be notified. So that is a very different capability than simply putting points on a map. The map becomes a part of a business reasoning. When we talk about the AI readiness, a lot of organizations do struggle, and when they run some audit, they do find some common gaps that they have in their data. When organizations audit their AI readiness, they usually find the same gap. And if you think there are some gap, you can also start looking into it in your organization and your project that you're working right now. So the semantic models are fragmented. We need to really make sure that there are semantic models in place. Like there are, I know a lot of folks have given us the answer, like they have like 6 to 20, 50, and so on and so forth, like 600 plus semantic models. But are they really have a unified pane of glass where the business can have a view of all the semantic models in one place? So the semantic models do seem to be really fragmented in many of the organizations, and there are multiple versions of the truth because of that. Metric definition conflict and key entities like customer, asset, facilities, location are not explicitly modeled. This is not the reason to be discouraged because it is the reason to start. Most organization is closing their gap because they think they already have pieces like Power BI models, Lakehouse table, or any data pipeline and data dictionary with the security controls and the operation log. The work is to connect those pieces together in the governed meaning layer. The worst approach is to wait until everything is perfect, but the best approach is to pick one domain and create a repeatable pattern. So, and this is not just theoretical. Organization in utilities, logistics, IT, operations, mission, environment already have and need this pattern. So if you talk about NMAX Power, they already have a utility grid operator that have a unified SCAD, and GIS data is turning into single ontology for the grid forecasting. The other organization, Kenrel, is an IT service company that is grounding their operational live data context to accelerate their safe deployment. So it's not the pattern is the consistent across the industry. It's the pattern to unify the access to data, define the shared metrics and the model entities, connect the live signals, and govern agent actions. Shared understanding first, and then have a trustworthy AI that follows. And when we talk about how to make it real, we do provide some sharing some roadmap to get started on it. The goal is not to boil the ocean. The goal is to pick just one domain, one model, and make one operational loop, so you know and you have a better understanding of how it works. We will close with a practical plan that will give us some enablement guidance and skill and development resources. So pilot one use case. Step one, look at the inventory. List the semantic models, the key reports, data products, domain that your team already has. Look for some duplicate metrics, any data inconsistency that you may have. Step two is consolidate, pick a domain, and agree on the metric that matters. Decide which model is authoritative, and then certify that, meaning mark the model that are trustworthy enough to ground the agents on, and be honest about which ones are not ready. And then in step four, model one domain. Choose something that is concrete, facilities, asset, incident, customer contract or service areas, route down the entities, their properties, their relationship, and the rules that govern them. Pilot one loop. You don't have to go for a big use case. For an example that I've given you about the facility, if a sensor alert creates an incident, the incident is connected to an asset and a facility. The route impacted is calculated and an agent can recommend a notification. So keep the first loop small and explainable and useful. That is going to be your first use case that you can start from. If you are one of those who have the Fabric tenant available in your workplace, Fabric IQ is enabled through the Fabric workload. But do not treat this as a technical toggle, treat it more as a governance decision. Decide which workspace is appropriate, which user should be included, and which data is safe to use. What the approval path is for preview capabilities like ontologies is start in a sandbox in a more controlled workspace. Build the pattern, validate it, and then decide what should move forward. The best team will bring the data engineering, analytics, governance, security, business owner together. But Fabric IQ is not only a data engineering project. It should be a business meaning project. So as we talk about getting started, we do have some learning areas that you can think about if you are looking for a certification. DP600 is closely aligned to semantic models and fabric analytics engineering, whereas the DP700 is broader data engineering. So ingestion, architecture, SQL, PySpark, if that is your area of concern, DP700 for you. But I want to be clear, skill-based certificate. A certificate can help your resume, but the real learning comes from the building. So I would strongly suggest if you can start building sub-semantic model and give a major like clear description, sketch an ontology for a domain you understand. Ask yourself, what are the entities, what are their properties, and how do they relate? What rules matter and what action should it follow? If you're a student that is watching right now, this is a good moment to enter the field. Fabric IQ is a product that is new, but underlying the skill. So translating business meaning or your project meaning. For example, if you are in a campus, you may have a lot of campus components or campus entities that you can build into an ontology, right? So building something into an ontology to have into a data model that the agent can use is going to be matter a lot. So when we talk about the resources that can keep you moving, we do have some resources like Microsoft Learn. We have Build 2026. If you have watched that, we do cover some sessions on the Fabric IQ ontologies and OneLake that will give you more understanding. We also have a Fabric community. You can also use this user group. We do have this data days session where we have covered other topics too, and there are some upcoming topics if you're interested. Do register and sign up for that, and stay in touch. Have a community. Have a study group. So if you are building something, share it with the other community. Learn with each other. That is how it will help you to keep moving. One thing that we see in one of the slide where we were showing the timelines, and one of the feature was planning in the Fabric IQ. So planning extend the same foundation as the other ontologies and the operational context, but it is more into a budget, forecast, from plan scenarios models. So if you have a use case where you want to, analyze the budget, forecast, plans, that is something that you can use a feature called the planning in Fabric IQ. Is the same principle applied if your planning process uses a governed semantic and shared business context? an agent and business user can reason from a common foundation. I will drop a link for the planning in Fabric IQ if you're interested to learn about it more. So you can go and check out more details about it. So as a recap, I know we have gone through the Fabric IQ. We have gone through some features like ontology, semantic models, agents, mode of agencies, and having the operational context with the operational agent and the guardrails practices. I wanted to do a bit recap on it. So Fabric IQ is what grounds the AI in the governed business context. Semantic models define one metric, one meaning, whereas the ontology turns fact into a connected understanding. The AI readiness can require a data unification or shared semantic, and the entity resolution with the lineage. The practical starting point is picking one domain, one operational rule. So the most important sentence is your agent are only as good as the shared semantic and the context give them. If the context is fragmented, if the metrics are fragmented, the agent can scale fragmentation. So if the context is governed and connected, the agent can reason more safely and usefully. And yeah, that is what I wanted to cover in today's session. I hope you all had to take away some good understanding for the Fabric IQ ontology and semantic model. And I'm happy to take the questions now. So if there are any questions, Maud or anyone can help us. We can take some questions before we call it off.
Absolutely. Thank you. I missed what you just said.
Yeah, thank you, Philippa.
Excellent. Yeah, no, great to have everybody here. Thank you so much for joining us as part of our Fabric Data Days. And yeah, we can definitely jump into some questions. I know Usman and Krishnaseth have been answering in the chat as we've been going. But yeah, if they're seeing questions they want to bring on the stage, definitely recommend that. I know we've had such a lively chat that there's a lot in there. And I know some of the questions have been answered. One thing I want to sort of say is there's a lot of things that are in public preview. And if you see something in public preview, jump in, it's free. Because I also saw a lot of questions of, oh, when is it in GA? You know, is it already in GA? Is it coming to GA? It's great to know when things are.
It's coming this year, so it's not too long. Yeah,
which is great that it's not too long, but that's also when the price tag gets attached to it. So I definitely encourage everybody to jump into public preview, because then you can start making the business case, you know, with your department, with your managers, to adopt some of these really great tools, or just even if you're on your own budget. Especially for me as a student, I have really appreciated public preview.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a really great time to get started. Get your hands dirty on it, because ontology is what's going to define your, the operational intelligence. So really great time to get it started.
Yeah, I remember. I come into data science from kind of two different paths. One was a master's in urban planning, which actually is what led me into GIS. And so I came into data science through geographic information systems, which was a different way to kind of learn it. But our very first class ever in GIS was on ontology. That was a foundational concept. And so it's interesting because I sort of feel like I'm still learning a lot about traditional data science. And of course, everybody who knows me knows I'm a huge advocate for the whole location intelligence, geoanalytics that is now part of Fabric. We've even created the characters. If you've seen them, we have a new geo guy who we call the cousin to Esri's Globy. And then we have a new cloud security fellow joining so I saw on LinkedIn today, someone's like, oh, I can't wait for those to be plushies in the merch store. But we were the ones who brought them to life and presented them to the Fabric community, and they've been officially adopted. But I wanted to say ontology is so important in terms of having that common language and just a concept which relates more to GIS. And I'd love you to articulate a little bit more the difference. That's if I give you a GIS concept to put it in more traditional data science terms. So, for example, I was doing a class project. We were looking at OpenStreetMap, and I was looking at it in the United States and in China and in India. And OpenStreetMap is a they call VGI, Volunteer Geographic Information. So it's crowdsourced. It's crowdsourced geographic information, and anybody can add to it, sort of, because in China it is illegal, but it is very, very illegal if you were to document anything to do with military or anything strategic or that's truly meant to not be mapped. But when I was looking at the United States and India, for example, the term playground. In the United States, a playground is where children will go to play with swings and a seesaw, and that is what the American definition of a playground is. Where in India, it's a cricket field. And
Yeah.
those are very different things. Where in the United States, we would call a field, something to do with sports or athletic field or something. We're more of a field, whereas in India, it's a playground. So that was our part of our learning of ontology, is just how language is used differently and how we need to unite language and make sure we're all talking about the same thing.
And I think that's where the description really matters. That can really help. Like I touch upon like how we can make our entities more descriptive to let the agent understand the intent and the relationship. So descriptions is really more important to have a descriptions in each entity or the data source that's coming in, and how we can, when we are governing these data sources, how we can add the descriptions layer on those data sources. That can really help, like which use cases are used for, what are the purpose of these data sources that it's serving right now. That really helps the agent to understand the intent and then reason across it. So description really matters. If there are synonyms that can have like different understanding, if there's a terminology that can have a different uh, definitions across the world, how we can add more descriptions to it so that the agent can reason across it. What is the intent of the customer ask? So description really matters, and it's not just the cosmetic right now. The more description we give to our entities and the data sources, the more agent can help, relate to the intent of the user ask.
So I have a question about that. And again, I coming at this from the GIS sort of view.
Mhm.
One of the things my professors really kind of put it, well, a couple of things that they really were emphasizing. One is that the data that they gave us was the cleanest data we would ever see. And then I had an internship when I got to go into the wilds and was like, oh, this is what raw data actually looks like. And then the other part, I had a couple ideas here. We were talking about, like for example, in GIS, you think about a lake and what is a lake, and what is the boundary of a lake, because that actually changes. And so how do you define, like, and then also all the words, like what defines a river, and then there's also all sorts of other things that are more like a brook, a stream. And so there's all these different words that kind of define the same things, but they're all sort of slightly different. So there's that. But then the biggest thing, kind of where I want to start this, is metadata and just the importance of metadata. And so how, when you talk about descriptions, how and sources and other things, how would you connect that to metadata and what best practices are for metadata?
So description is a part of a metadata, right? When we're talking about the metadata, we are talking about the overview of the data that contains a location of the data, description of the data, and if there's a schema bind to the data, it also gives you the schema overview of the data. So description, we should treat description as a part of the metadata, not different from the metadata. So if we are looking into a data catalog, uh, for example, a purview, um, we should be looking at how the metadata should be received for these entities and the data sources. And the metadata should contain the description of the data, the location of the data, where it's originating, and that's the basic metadata that we are receiving. There can be different tags and the classifications that we can tie our entities or the data sources to, but the metadata does important, and it doesn't differ from like having a description as one property, but it's a part of the metadata that we should be we should be looking at. So when you are attaching a metadata, it should contain a description, location, and if there's a schema bind to it, then you can attach.
Super appreciated. That no, that's very helpful. And I think that actually you mentioned Purview, and if we can just spend a moment on that because we come to you, and that's all on our banner as the location intelligence and security user group. So Purview is very much part of what we want to talk about is that governance and security inside of Fabric, and how how do all of the, like, so for example, row level security, column level security, object level security, PII, personal identifying information, PHI, personal health information, anything that needs to be encrypted, credit cards or masked. How do you uh, sort of connect all of that with ontology and with Fabric IQ?
So yeah, so this is a really great. We do have a Purview. Purview is a big Microsoft product uh, family that comprises of different solution areas. There is a governance, there is a security, and there is a compliance. When we talk about the PII information, we need to look for the compliance, right? The information protection feature that is a part of the Purview. That if there are any sensitive information types in your data that may contain a credit card number, social security number, that should be identified as a critical and a sensitive information, we can create a sensitivity labels on those data. And once we create the sensitivity labels and we apply the policies on those labels, it inherit the beauty of the purview information protection. If I tell you, like once it inherit the sensitivity labels on the data, it caters that inheritance throughout the organization. Even if you share this data to any other team, if there's any update, like for example, if there was a data that added, which is a PI information, and it detect that, then the label was changed and it will right away change to the confidential, or if there are different sensitivity labels that you can create. So once you create the sensitivity labels, it will inherit the sensitivity label cadence to the across the organization, whether you share the report or the data to Power BI, in the teams, in the email, it is going to carry that sensitivity label with it. So this is how important the purview is, how you can protect and how you can enforce the policy to protect the sensitive informations that your data may require, right? There are different ways to apply the RLS and the OLS on the Power BI, and if it depends on like what use cases you are. If you are a SQL engineer or warehouse engineer working on the warehouse, there are ways where you can use the T-SQL queries to implement the RLS and the OLS. Right. You can also, if there are ways to, if you're working on the workspace, how you can control the boundaries to share just the warehouse and the workspace. You can just share the workspace warehouse and only enable the read all SQL endpoint so that the user can only have the access to the warehouse, whereas the other items like the lake houses, event house, data pipeline will not be visible to the users. So it really matter like what use case you are working on and how you can implement those control boundaries so that security is in place and enforced for the users. That should be prevented to see certain warehouses or any personal items or any sensitivity labels for documents that's protected.
No, that's really helpful, and I think that's the thing is that to me, and I think for all of us, is that security should not be bolted on. It should sort of be part of the DNA of what everybody's thinking about as they deploy these. And being part of AI Skills Fest, I thought was interesting is one of the concepts that they introduced early on was saying we need to even evolve past human in the loop and really start to embrace the concept of human in the lead.
That's an interesting, yeah, angle, um, because a lot of with this era, to be honest, we are working on the use cases, but we really need to make sure that the use cases are trusted, have a guardrails, and best practices in place, have the traceability and lineage in place, so we know what users and how users are consuming these agents for. So that's where I think the human lead conversation comes in, because putting those governance in place is really important to let the agent work in a controlled boundary, not just consume any way it can consume it by the consumer. So yeah, that is really an interesting relance to have a human in the lead.
Fantastic. I also saw something in the chat that I wanted to comment on. Is that that just okay? So we were talking about user groups, and the question is, I couldn't find any in Dubai related. That's why I ask, and I want to sort of say, because I just sort of put back in the chat, the task is then clear. You do need one more person to join you, and you can start your own user group. That's actually how Location Intelligence and Security User Group was founded. I actually started as a programming volunteer. I started as a volunteer in another user group, and the lead had actually reached out because he'd sort of lost his co-leads and he'd moved, and I think he was looking for some volunteers to kind of re-spark the user group. And then he just was, and then there was sort of a mismatch because the quality of the speakers that we were programming versus the marketing that was happening weren't aligned. We were bringing powerhouse speakers, and it was very clear very quickly. He's like, you know what? I think I'm ready to retire this group. And I was so inspired by being part of the group that I had already set up and started my own group. And so he ended up just kind of yielding the group, and we sort of built on top of what is the former Research Triangle user group. And so that's where we sort of built from. But I guess my advice to somebody would be get involved with a group, become a volunteer, just get involved and see how it goes. And then if you can't find one in your location and you want to do some in-person events, it's really easy to set up. They just ask that you have a lead and a co-lead, and you just register it and you start building it. But we're more than happy to give you any advice to do that, because we would really encourage people to start your fabric user groups if you're not finding one representing your location or your interests.
And I think many folks I have been seeing right now is stepping up and creating their own location user group for the fabric. So if you are in a location where you don't find the user group over there, you can start one. Actually, I'm based in North Carolina, so I don't find any much of the user group. So I'm also thinking to create one user group in the North Carolina community, so that user can come in and have a group to share learning across the fabric and their features and products. It's a really great initiative. If you have nothing in your area and location that you're looking for, it's a really great step to start thinking about creating a new one yourself and invite people.
Yeah, and I'd also want to acknowledge hugely Fabric Data Days. So I have enjoyed doing events for many years. I love events. I've definitely got the opportunity to do many of them as a Women Tech Maker ambassador, and that was part of the Google community for a long time, and now that's part of Technovation. And so that was, as a Women Tech Makers, I did lots of events and podcasting, and as a Microsoft student ambassador, also had a lot of opportunity to do events, and that's exactly how I've got to know so many people in the Microsoft community. But in graduating, as I just graduated, I've just actually, today is my first day that my student ambassador email does not work because I've officially been offboarded, and I'm sad, but also like that was ultimately what happens when you graduate and move on to the next chapter of life. So my way of staying in the Microsoft ecosystem is through the user group, because I know that there's a lot of people who want to be MVPs, most valuable player, Microsoft's most valuable professionals, which is an amazing community and an amazing credential. There's other people who want to be MCTs, Microsoft certified trainers, and there's barriers to entry with that. MVP, you need to be nominated. You need to have at least kind of an average of 2 contributions to your community every month. You need to fill out a pretty rigorous application. You need to be reviewed, and then you need to be accepted. So it is one path. And then MCT, you have to have your certifications, including either the AB 731 or AB 730, plus the credentials for what you want to teach. And then I believe it's about $1,600 at a 3-day workshop to get credentialed. which is actually the thing I want to do next. And then, but the user group, there's little barrier to entry except for finding a partner and doing 6 events a year in person or online. And so I just want to sort of say that, and every event that you do as either an MCT or a user group lead or co-lead is qualifying for MVP as well. So they all kind of go together, and the events you speak and present at are also qualifying towards your MCT. So it all kind of goes together. But I would say having a Fabric user group is probably, if you're part of the Fabric community, is probably the least barrier to entry, of those various ways to be a community leader in the Microsoft ecosystem. Or you can follow Raj and just become an FTE as a full-time employee. But that is the highest bar.
Congratulations, Fulba. You're doing great, and this session has been nothing but a really great information. So if you have not checked out the previous sessions, do check out on the YouTube channel. We do have posted the recording of these sessions. So thank you, Philippa, for organizing this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. We have had over 5,000 people register for our very specific community-led events. I can't even imagine how many people are actually part of Data Days. And again, my thank you to the Fabric community, because they were instrumental in bringing most of you here. And one of our commitments through the YouTube channels and other content and just our Luma page is to build community. And so we love having you here. We also love having you get to know each other and support each other and be part of things. And also, I'll just give another one more plug real quick. So I actually started as a Microsoft Fabric moderator on the Microsoft Reactor stage. And I would say if you are interested in being a moderator, it's great to let community leads know. And then you can be part of the moderator chat on Microsoft Reactor. And it was the fastest, easiest way for the event to then raise my hand to be a speaker on Reactor. And so I actually have my third speaking next week. I'm moderating later this week, and I'm speaking next week. So if you have interest in speaking on larger stages, Microsoft Reactor is a fabulous one, and also tons and tons of content and learning available for everybody here on the Microsoft Reactor stage as well. So yeah, it's a very welcoming, amazing community. Love to getting to know everybody here. Thank you so much to our speaker. Really terrific presentation. Really well done. I always learn a lot. I actually, honestly, I program things that I want to learn. And you were saying, so I did get the question, how to be a moderator at Reactor. So yes, if you want to be a moderator, there's a couple ways to do it. The community leads are the ones who do all the programming. So you've got Shannon Lindsay, you've got Pam Spear, and you've got Ashley Felt are the leads of that. And if you want me to connect you to any of them, I would say reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can facilitate that introduction. And I'll just give me 1 second, and I'll pop in my LinkedIn and so just reach out to me, and I will facilitate an introduction for you if you are interested in raising your hand to be a moderator, because it's a really tight community and we all are very supportive of each other. And so yeah, that's my I'm putting in my link. So just DM me there, and I will get you connected. So with that, everybody, I think you're all part of Fabric Data Days. Just a reminder to sign up, get your free exam vouchers. This is definitely one of the qualifying events. Love having you all here, and look forward to seeing you all next time. And again, thank you again to our mods, our speaker, and our fantastic audience. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time.